Every day, all over the world, recorded music is being played in many places. As a performer or master owner, you are entitled to royalties, your neighboring rights. In many countries, local rights organizations do their best to collect and distribute these royalties so that you can claim your share. But to collect royalties yourself in every individual country is complex and time-consuming. And when you let a local organization represent you worldwide, you don't always receive what you deserve, as exchanging music rights data between organizations isn't optimized, and you could be missing claims on a particular version of a recording. So royalties potentially remain unclaimed and end up in the black box. Peermusic Neighboring Rights makes sure that doesn't happen. At Peermusic Neighboring Rights, we help you claim your royalties worldwide. We have contracts with rights organizations in over 40 countries, and our tailor-made software optimizes your music catalog data for each country. Thanks to our expertise, network, and knowledge, you get the fair share you deserve, wherever your music is being played. Contact Peermusic Neighboring Rights today to maximize your royalty collections. Go to nr.peermusic.com.
Hi, everybody. I'm Yvonne Drazan. I'm the Vice President of the Latin Division at Peermusic. And you know Peermusic as music publishers. I've been on a few panels. I'm sure you've probably seen my face a few times at this point. But we wanted to talk to you today about neighboring rights, or derechos conexos, which is what it's called in Spanish. So I wanted to take the moment to introduce my colleague and our CEO of Peermusic, Mary Megan Peer. So thanks for being here. So she's going to help us to better understand what neighboring rights are, and she'll help us understand also what the royalty is that relates to the artist and the sound recording. It's a little different than on the music publishing side. So, Mary Megan, you saw an opportunity to expand into neighboring rights. Tell us a little bit about neighboring rights and about Peermusic forming this new division.
Sounds good. Thanks, Yvonne, for being here today. And also thank you for the LAMC for having Peermusic. As you mentioned, Peermusic's been involved in the LAMC for quite a long time, primarily as a publisher. We have a long history, over 90 years in music publishing, and the Latin genre has always been very important for the company. We have offices in 7 countries in Latin America, plus another 5 in the United States, obviously some of our biggest Latin markets. In total, around the world, we are in 31 countries with 38 offices. So we have a fairly global footprint as a music publisher. Almost 2 years ago now, we decided to expand outside of publishing into the neighboring rights division. And we acquired 3 neighboring rights companies at the same time, together forming the world's leading independent neighboring rights services, which is now known as Peermusic Neighboring Rights.
Cool. So in merging these 3 companies together and bringing them all together under the Peermusic umbrella, it gave us a little bit of a head start, obviously, in the neighboring rights area. So who are some of the artists that we represent currently for neighboring rights?
So we represent over 2,500 recording artists, plus another 300 record labels. Our clients include Rihanna, David Guetta, Billie Eilish, and Phineas. On the Latin side, some of our bigger names are Becky G, Don Omar, Lido Pimenta, and most recently we've signed Luis Enrique.
We're super excited about that one too. Okay, so neighboring rights as a concept, or derechos conexos, como se conocen en Latinoamérica. It seems really mysterious. Everybody, I think it's even more mysterious, even than music publishing, maybe. So can you help us to better understand what exactly it is and how it differs from music publishing?
Sure. So the way I think about it is that neighboring rights are associated with a sound recording, whereas music publishing is associated with a composition, i.e. the music and lyrics. So a sound recording is one individual recording of a composition, and whereas compositions are frequently, when they get popular, recorded multiple times.
Right.
So on the neighboring rights side, the rights are paid to the performer, also to non-featured performers, so for example, band members, and to the master owners. Obviously, those roles can be the same person or completely different people. Mm-hmm. Whereas on the publishing side, the rights are paid to the songwriter and to the publisher. Of course, many songwriters are also the performers, so they're eligible for both neighboring rights and publishing rights.
Right.
But if you just are the songwriter and you do not perform on a recording, you're not eligible for neighboring rights associated with that recording.
Okay.
Like on the publishing side, there's a network of societies around the world set up to collect neighboring rights. In most countries, those societies are different from the societies that collect publishing rights. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that's fairly different from publishing is that the rules and regulations, laws surrounding neighboring rights are generally much newer than publishing rights, and they can vary greatly by territory. Whereas on the publishing side, the laws are generally fairly similar. Term of or length of copyright can be a little bit different, but generally the same types of uses carry a publishing right.
Okay, so you're saying, so it's also the master owners for the sound recordings and also the artists or any performers. And sometimes you can be both. So like for an independent artist who is the artist themselves, they perform on their own recording and they own their own masters, then they would be able to qualify for both under neighboring rights. And if they're also the songwriter, then that would be a separate royalty, which is their music publishing royalty.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. So who collects these royalties for the artists, performers, and master owners on the neighboring rights side?
So there's a network of societies that collect these. In the US, it's Sound Exchange, for example. And every major music market has a society or two. In some countries, there is a separate society for the performer side of the right and for the master owner side of this right.
Oh, okay.
And in some territories, like in the US, Sound Exchange collects for both performers and master owners.
Okay. So there's a lot of talk in the industry right now about the importance of metadata in a lot of different ways. Obviously, metadata is the part that's included in the sound recording that includes all of the information, contact information, songwriter information, publishing, all of that information is included in the metadata. So why is metadata also an important part of this area of neighboring rights? And how important is it to make sure that all of that information is correct in order for neighboring rights to be collected properly?
Well, obviously, it's important for all of the creators to be properly compensated and recognized for their creative contributions for the work. And then the societies actually use the metadata to decide who to compensate for a neighboring right. So for example, and it depends on the society, but many societies pay 50% of the performer right to the featured performer, and the other 50% gets split between the non-featured performers. It's really important to have a full list of who those non-featured performers are and make sure that you're properly credited if you're one of them, or else you're not going to be able to claim any neighboring rights.
Okay, so if the metadata is not correct or if it's incomplete, that they could be missing collections. There's people that won't be able to collect their neighboring rights royalties.
Exactly. Societies use sources like Discogs, like the Apple database to check label copy to figure out who is the master owner, the featured and the non-featured performer. And based off of that, they decide who they should pay out. Okay.
So like, let's say, for example, if there was a producer that produced a track and then he happened to also on one of the songs play keyboards or something like that, then in that case, because he's an actual performer, not just a producer, but on that particular recording, because he played piano or she played piano, then they would be able to be eligible for a royalty as a non, what did you call it again?
A non-featured performer is generally what is referred to. Okay. And that is correct. Though confusingly in some countries, I'm thinking of Germany particularly, but there are a number of them, producers can receive neighboring rights without making what they call an audible contribution to the recording. Okay,
so it really will vary a lot between territories as to what's eligible. Just like here in the United States, you mentioned that Sound Exchange is the sort of society, neighboring rights society for the United States, but it collects for completely different things than around the world, right?
The types of uses that are eligible for neighboring rights in the U.S. are completely different than they are in other countries. In the U.S., the only modes of performance that are eligible for neighboring rights are satellite radio and non-interactive streaming, which essentially is Pandora is by far the largest in the market. And so that's where Sound Exchange collects their rights. In contrast, most countries outside of the US, there isn't a right associated with digital performance. Rather, the neighboring right is collected based off of performances in restaurants, hotels, shops, radio, television, a lot of the usages that we think of as CAP or BMI collecting.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about why peermusic decided to get into this side of the business in addition to what we already do as music publishers.
Well, we'd been looking at it for a long time. Obviously, there's a huge amount of nuance between countries, and we realized that we really needed deep expertise in order to do a good job in this business. It's also developing very quickly. The laws around it in different countries are developing, and it's a growing income stream. So we thought it was great to be able to offer our songwriter clients this additional service on a global basis. The three companies we acquired very much share peermusic's commitment to individual client service, an independent mindset, and have also spent money to develop proprietary technology, which is customized for each different society around the world. So we really felt that with this acquisition, we'd be able to offer the same level of service we offer in publishing on the neighboring rights side. Another important aspect of working with this neighboring rights team is that they have a great deal of experience. Two of the managing directors and a number of the other folks who work for these companies have worked on the society side. So they really understand how these rights are distributed by the societies and are in a position to track income for our clients based off of the specific rules in each country.
Right. And I mean, I've been in a few of our internal meetings that we've had since we started working in the neighboring rights business. And I was so struck by my colleagues that work with you on this team telling us that some of the intricacies that need to happen just for collection in certain territories and how complicated it can be, and how, you know, even some territories are working on like a paper system, right? Still, like everything is in paper, it's not even digitized. And so without having those real direct connections and deep understanding in each one of the markets, it can be really difficult to do on your own, I would assume, right?
Absolutely. And the neighboring rights societies don't have anything like SysNet, where all the publishing societies share registration information. There's not yet that backbone on the neighboring rights side. So it is really important that each society has an individual registration. There also isn't, on the publishing side, it's called a Common Works Registration, a CWR, so that essentially the same file can be used to register at a number of societies. That doesn't exist on the neighboring rights side. So you need an agent who knows the different formats that have to be registered at each different society in each country in order to make sure that your works are properly registered.
Right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to sort of dive a little bit deeper into about the actual sound recordings, because I know that there can be like in music publishing, it's one song, and that song can be recorded a bunch of times. But if there's like, for example, 20 different recordings of the same song, how does that add a different layer of complexity to collecting for neighboring rights?
Absolutely, because you have to basically claim each of those 20 recordings in order to receive the monies for them. And it's very easy for one recording to perhaps be the primary recording, but the collection society doesn't necessarily know that, so they actually allocate all the money to a different remix of the song. So if you haven't claimed that individual remix, even if you are clearly on there, it's Rihanna, it's clearly the featured performer, they won't necessarily link you up unless it's been properly registered. So it's incredibly important to register all the remixes. And our proprietary software actually allows us to go out to Discogs, to go out to the Apple database and several other sources and pull in data when new remixes are released, because we can't assume that all of our performers even know when there are new remixes of their work. So we are constantly scraping these other databases for data, and that allows us to have the best registrations of different societies.
So it's a lot of detective work that needs to happen too.
It really is, yes.
Yeah, pulling all that information together. So how can a neighboring rights agency help musicians and performers to maximize their earnings in this area?
Well, I think the example I just gave is a big one. Being on top of your recordings and having the software which allows you to do that. In today's world, there's so many remixes that come out. Perhaps they have different recordings in different countries, different ISRCs associated with them. So having an agent who can keep on top of that data is really important, and then make sure that it's continually registered at various societies. And then, quite frankly, follow up afterwards. We use BMAT and chart metrics and other data sources to look at the charts in local countries and make sure that our performers and our master owner clients are getting, what monies that make sense based off of their performance in the charts.
Right. So for an artist and or a master owner, what should they be looking for in a neighboring rights partner or hiring a neighboring rights agency to work with with them?
I think the most important thing is the industry expertise. I mean, anyone who's been listening to our conversation can tell how deep in the weeds this gets, understanding the rules in each country. So having an agent who has that expertise, also who can be proactive on registering new remixes, registering new releases, and then following up on the tracking of those. Like in publishing, I think it's important that an agent have a good relationship with the major societies around the world. It's always helpful if they're going to be the biggest folks paying you. And finally, transparency in data and reporting is very important.
Right. And how big is the neighboring rights market?
It's pretty big. The last IFP numbers said it was $2.6 billion annually.
Wow.
And it's certainly growing rapidly. There are over 60 countries in the world that recognize neighboring rights, and there are kind of more every few months. So that's another aspect of growth. And it is increasingly being recognized that digital rights carry a neighboring right. And that is also a huge area for growth, because as we know, that is where the music industry is generally growing.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Go get your money, kids. Make sure you have somebody representing. Okay, so I think we maybe have demystified it as best as we can. So, and this is all kind of a learning experience for me too, because I've been doing music publishing for so long that this is a very new area for me as well. So I'm learning right along with everybody else. But let's see if I got it right. These are my takeaways. So neighboring rights are only paid to performers and master owners. That's the first main thing. Neighboring rights are generated by the performance of the recordings in places like bars, clubs, theaters, hotels, and radio outside of the United States. And in the United States, we have Sound Exchange, which collects for all of the areas that you explained earlier. If you're a performer on any of the recordings, make sure that your information is included in the metadata. So even if you picked up the spoons and you're on that recording, you should make sure that you're in like the label copyright, contact the label, or if it's your friend that owns their masters, make sure that they include all that metadata, make sure that you're in there. And then the last thing is, if your recordings are being played around the world, you really do need a neighboring rights agency to represent you, because it's something that's really, really difficult to do on your own, because the criteria can vary so differently throughout the world. Every territory is a little bit different and has its own eccentricities. So having an agent to represent you is really the way to go. Right? Did I get everything?
That sounded good to me.
Well, good, because you're the expert. So if I pass the test with you, then we're good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mary Megan, for taking the time to explain that to everybody. I hope everyone that's watching at the LAMC, thank you guys for taking the time to listen. And also, I hope you learned a little bit more about neighboring rights and understand the mystery behind it a little bit better. And thanks to the LAMC again for having us today.
Yeah, and thank you, Yvonne, for walking us through this.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, bye, everybody. Thanks.